Alex from Gainesville, I can only assume Florida, because he said, how do you view Dan Mullen as a candidate for another major coaching job now that NIL has taken some pressure off the coach in recruiting? He can jump in whenever he wants to. Dan Mullen is in one of the best positions, one of the most privileged positions that someone who lost their job could ever hope to be in, because his stock is rising every year. It's called the John Gruden effect. Gruden got fired once upon a time, went and sat in the Monday Night Football booth, did his Gruden QB camp on ESPN once or twice a month, and that stock just went up and up and up. And the reason is not because he was turning into any different a person. The reason is not because he was a different coach from sitting in a booth than he had been when he was on the field not performing at a high enough level for his boss's liking. The reason is because humans make these hires. And in many cases, that human is not a football savant. And so you can impress them talking ABC 1, 2, 3. You don't really have to talk calculus. You can talk basic arithmetic that any coach worth his or her salt would be able to do, and you can impress some of these people. There's no better place to do that than on a television screen. Folks like me can sound like we could coach if all we have to do is talk about it, and we all know that's not true. So imagine taking someone who actually is a brilliant football mind and putting them in a studio, and they get to question and second guess. They get to make predictions. They get to never be wrong. That's the world Dan Mullen lives in right now. And you know who sees him? Not some people. Like when you're the head coach at Florida, you have a press conference. Your fans hear it. And maybe if you wear a Darth Vader costume, maybe the nation hears it. But by and large, it's pretty insulated to the region, and your fan base hears you. When you're on national TV, everyone hears you, not just fans. Chancellors hear you. Presidents hear you. Athletic directors hear you. And so Dan Mullen has gotten several offers. Don't kid yourself. Dan Mullen, if he really was just dying to get back into coaching, would be in coaching already. Several years in to a new coaching tenure, by the way, because he could have had one the moment he got fired at Florida. He just sits and waits. There's no hurry. The buyout life is such that you don't have to jump in. He's not hurting for money. And so Dan Mullen's doing what, frankly, I think several other guys may desire or long to do. Now, they don't want to get fired, but I told you, and I've told you for a couple of months now, I know of active head coaches who have mentioned Mullen's name to me specifically, not in a pejorative manner, but they've spoken Dan Mullen's name, and they've said, you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to retire, quote unquote, and go do what Dan Mullen's doing, only to know I'm coming back, but just to wait and pick and choose the moment I re-enter the sport. And the thinking right now from some, although they haven't done it, the thinking from some is I could step away now. I'm 45, I'm 50, I'm 53. I could step away. I could go work as long as I wanted to. I could still make plenty good enough money, and I'm already financially set anyway. I've made tens of millions of dollars coaching a game, and I could spend more time with my kids, and I could have a much freer, looser schedule. There'd be much lower stress, and all the while, I'm on the phone with my agent a couple of times a week, and he's fielding offers indefinitely, as long as I want him to, and I give him 5 names. I give him 5 universities that I'm willing to go to, and we just wait for one to open. There's incredible churn in this sport. So Dan Mullen, if the job he wants isn't open right now, it'll be open unless he has his eye on one. Most coaches don't just have their eye on one, but even if you do, if it's not coming open until 2031, who cares? You're sitting in a studio. It's no sweat off your back. Who cares? So, yeah, Dan Mullen will come back. There's no way Dan Mullen's coached his last game. No way. But there's also no way Dan Mullen's sitting there, on the phone with his agent, pouring sweat, tie undone, top 2 buttons undone, scratching his neck. You got to get me in anywhere. I'll take anything. I'll coach middle school if I have to. That's not the way it has to be for the Dan Mullens of the world.